This conference will now be recorded.
Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Prashani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshtari. So today I have been given the topic of Kardama Muni and Devahuti's marriage. So if we let me just figure this out. Okay, fine. Okay, so the main, so right now in Srimad Bhagavatam, this is the third canto. So we are right now in a conversation between Vidura and Maitreya Muni. So Vidura is actually asking Maitreya Muni about the creation, basically how Brahma created, how Brahma propagated humanity, how did the Prajapatis come, how all the dynasties. So in this particular chapter, the conversation begins about Kardama Muni because he wanted to know about Swayambhuva Manu's dynasty. So the dynasty of Swayambhuva Manu, who is I think the current Manu for our age. So he is asking how the propagation of jivas happened, and now he is asking about King Swayambhuva Manu. So Maitreya Muni relates the story of Kardama Muni and Devahuti. So in this, there are three main characters, of course: Kardama Muni, Swayambhuva Manu, and Devahuti, who is the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu. So who is Kardama Muni? He is actually one of the Prajapatis. He is the son of Brahma. So on Brahma's instructions, he practiced penances for thousands of years on the banks of river Saraswati. And because of these penances, he was instructed by Lord Brahma to procreate. And because of these penances, the Supreme Personality of Godhead was very pleased with him. And he appeared before him and gave him darshan. So Prabhupada explains that Brahma praises Kardama Muni because he carries out the instructions of his spiritual master and father, which is Lord Brahma, in totality, without any cheating. So in one of the purports, Srila Prabhupada explains that in this material world, we have a tendency to cheat. It is one of the 4 material defects, as we all know. So, but how can we overcome this material defect of cheating, this propensity of cheating? It is by carrying out the orders of our spiritual master. So, because he carried out the instructions of Lord Brahma, he overcame all the material propensities, and he is situated in perfect Krishna consciousness. So when the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared before Kardama Muni, he prays to him for a suitable wife because he was instructed by Lord Brahma to procreate. So he prays for a suitable wife, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being very pleased with him, tells him that he has arranged for Swayambhuva Manu's daughter Devahuti as a suitable wife for him. He further says that he shall manifest his own plenary portion as Kapiladeva through Devahuti. So this way he has already heard from the Supreme Personality of Godhead that this is going to happen, and in 2 days Swayambhuva Manu will visit him for his daughter's hand in marriage. So the day after he gets darshan of the Lord, Swayambhuva Manu, along with his wife and daughter, they arrive at the hermitage of Kardama Muni. So the ashram of Kardama Muni is located at the lake called Bindu Sarovar. So it's actually, I think, a very special lake. So he arrives, and then let's see what happens next. So the whole these 3 chapters is basically, I'll just try to condense it as a story of what happens in these 3 chapters, and then we can go through a few essential points that I've picked out, which we can as takeaways. Otherwise, because each chapter, each verse, actually Prabhupada has explained in so much detail, it is endless nectar. We can go, I think, as a seminar for like 10 days on just these 3 chapters. So I have tried to be very concise. So if anybody feels that I have missed out any points, so please feel free to let me know. So the next. So once Prajapati, once Manu arrives at his ashram, a brief overview of this is the chapter of the 22nd chapter. Sorry, yeah. So this is what happens in brief. I have just prepared the main points that happens in this chapter. So once they arrive, Swayambhuva Manu glorifies Kardama. He glorifies Kardama. Manu offers reasons to Kardama to accept Devahuti. Sorry, one second. To accept Devahuti, and then Kardama accepts the offer, but with a condition. And we will talk about what that condition is shortly. So after this, of course, the marriage of Kardama Muni and Devahuti takes place, and Swayambhuva Manu returns. And there's a description of how Swayambhuva Manu is a wonderful ruler, and there's a description of his wonderful rule. So this is in brief, this is what happens. So when Swayambhuva Manu enters the ashram, he sees the radiant form of Kardama Muni. So Kardama Muni also received the king with a lot of honor and praise. So Manu glorified Kardama Muni on his virtues of austerity, knowledge, and mystic powers. He then, because he's a little hesitant, I think he has a little bit of a misapprehension of whether Kardama Muni will actually accept his daughter. So he starts sharing the qualities of Devahuti to Kardama Muni, so that he fully and wholeheartedly accepts Devahuti as his wife. So then Kardama Muni, of course, because he already was instructed by Krishna, he accepts the offer, but he gives one condition. So this condition is that he will stay with Devahuti only until she begets an offspring. So once she produces an offspring, he will go into the renounced order of life. He will basically become a sannyasi. So thus their marriage takes place, and both the king and the queen, the wife of Swayambhuva Manu is Shatarupa Devi. So both of them, they return to their palaces. Here in the Bhagavatam, actually there are around 10 verses that describe the glorious capital of Manu, which is Barhismati. The name of his capital is Barhismati, and his rule. It is described how wonderfully Manu ruled his kingdom in complete Krishna consciousness. Although he was absorbed in material happiness, in ruling the kingdom, he was always situated perfectly in Krishna consciousness. So he enjoyed the riches of material kingdom, but because he was always in Krishna consciousness, the Bhagavatam describes that he was situated perfectly. He passed his time always thinking of Lord Vasudeva. So then let's see the next chapter. So the next chapter describes, so once Kardama Muni and Devahuti's marriage happened, Devahuti started serving Kardama Muni, even though she was a princess and was used to all the kingly opulences in life. She was very happily she accepted this marriage with Kardama Muni, and with so much of dedication, chastity, and there's a whole list of her qualities. She started serving Kardama Muni with so much of dedication. So after the marriage, she served him like this, and she served him with so much of focus that she grew very weak and emaciated after so many years. But she always served him without any distraction or diversions. So seeing her dedication and seeing her condition, Kardama Muni became overcome with compassion actually, and he offered his spiritual blessings to her. So Devotee was very satisfied and happy hearing from her husband that when he expressed his happiness and when he expressed that he wanted to offer his spiritual blessings to her, she was very happy because being such a chaste wife, her main goal was to satisfy him, and seeing that he was very satisfied with her, it gave her great happiness. So she inquired from him. She requested that to fulfill his promise of giving her children, because for her that was what she wanted from Kardama Muni. So she requested Kardama Muni to be given a suitable form and arrange a suitable house so that she may beget progeny for him. So hearing this, Kardama Muni realized that of course now it is time to fulfill his promise also to Lord Brahma to propagate progeny and to beget offspring with Devahuti. So he created an amazing and huge aerial mansion that could actually travel. Now there's like around I think 10 to 15 verses in the Bhagavatam that describe in detail this amazing mansion. It is 7 stories, bedecked with jewels, huge gardens. It's ever increasing. It could travel anywhere to many mountains and anywhere in the world. So it was like a flying mansion. And so this mansion, it was so beautiful that it even astonished Kardama Muni. And of course, Devahuti then entered she entered this desire-fulfilling lake because she was in such a weak and emaciated condition. She entered the lake and regained her beautiful form with the help of 1,000 maidservants. So of course she has her beautiful form back. She has a beautiful house, a beautiful mansion, and Kardama Muni is ready to enter into Grihastha life to beget progeny. So there is a special mention here that Kardama Muni achieved such powers. How could he manifest such an amazing mansion? He, of course, performed penances for so many years, and one would say that it was his yogic powers that gave him such amazing abilities to create this mansion. But actually in the Bhagavatam it is noted that he did not achieve this because he was such an amazing yogi. He achieved this because he was a devotee of the Lord. So that is the main point to note over here. Because he is a devotee of the Lord, he was able to achieve this. So then the story goes on that Kardama Muni impregnated Devahuti and she gave birth to 9 beautiful daughters. So Kardama then, fulfilling his promise, he wanted to, of course, leave Devahuti and leave the Grihastha life and enter into renounced orders. He wanted to go to the forest, meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead and Vasudev, and of course, attain perfection of life. But Devahuti, hearing this, she was of course attached to her husband. She was very pained. And she requested him, she appealed to him that if you leave and if you go to the forest, The 9 daughters, of course, in the future, they will find their husbands and they will also leave. So who will give me solace? So in this way, she was hinting that she was requesting him to beget a son from him. She wanted a son. So Kardama Muni, of course, already knew this beforehand, because Vasudev had already instructed him that he would come in the womb of Devahuti as his plenary portion. So Kardama Muni then pleaded Kardama Muni to stay back. Devahuti pleaded Kardama Muni to stay back. So once she requested him for a son, Kardama Muni fulfilled that, and he instructed them. He responded back to her that he will appear as that the Lord himself will appear as your son. So just faithfully worship the Lord. So Devahuti faithfully worshipped the Lord with great respect. And after many years, Lord appeared in her womb. So the demigods were, of course, greatly joyed by this, and Brahma, along with all the other sages, appeared to offer their respects to the Lord when he was still in her womb. Brahma was also greatly pleased with his son Kardama Muni, like I had mentioned earlier, that he carried out his instructions faithfully. He then asked Kardama Muni to offer his 9 daughters in marriage to the 9 sages. So Brahma further he said to Devahuti that the Supreme Lord who is within your womb will be the foremost among the perfected beings. He will cut all knots of your ignorance and doubt and will travel all over the world. He will be known as Kapila and increase your fame. So basically in this chapter, so far this is what has happened. Kardama Muni instructs Devahuti to faithfully worship the Lord, and Lord Kapila appears in her womb. So Brahma appears along with the sages and glorifies Kardama Muni and Devahuti and Lord Kapila. And Brahma then he departs, and the marriage of the 9 daughters of Devahuti and Kardama Muni happened with the 9 sages. So thus he departs, and after this marriage happens, Kardama Muni starts praying to Lord Kapila. And once Lord Kapila appears from the womb of Devahuti, Kardama Muni approached the Lord and began his prayers and started glorifying him. After glorifying him, he asked Lord Kapila to give him permission to renounce the world. So because finally he has fulfilled his promise of giving a son as well to Devahuti. So the Lord then responded and gave him permission to go and surrender and to worship the Lord eternally. The Kapila Muni also, Lord Kapila also said that he will explain this knowledge to Devahuti so that she may attain perfection. Kardama Muni then circumambulated the Lord and left for the forest. So this here we can see Kardama Muni's renunciation. Although he was fully engaged in Grihastha life with Devahuti, enjoying so many material pleasures, living in a beautiful house, in thousands of maidservants, he did not lose focus of his main goal, that is to go into the renounced order, surrender and worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here he went into the forest, he accepted the Maunvrata and took complete shelter of the Lord. He fixes his mind on the Lord, and in Srimad Bhagavatam it is said how he becomes free from false ego, material affection, and he achieves self-realization. So ultimately, Kardama Muni, he attained the path back to Godhead. So in brief, this is the 3 chapters, chapter 22, 23 and 24. So it's a long story, but there are a lot of, if you go into the actual verses in the Bhagavatam, there are a lot of important points that Prabhupada relates, and also in the verses themselves. So I have just picked out a few of these verses and important points that we should imbibe. So let's go to those points. So I have basically got around 6 points. So the first one in chapter 22, in Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that the highest authority always is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So where does this point come from? So when Kardama, if you remember, when Manu asked Kardama Muni for Devotee marriage to him, he accepted Devahuti, but he gave that one condition. Now, if you remember, Brahma's instruction to Kardama Muni was only to procreate, was to beget children. So, but still, he had this desire to enter into renounced order of life. So, when his father's instruction was only to procreate, why did he want to go into renunciation? So, Kardama Muni actually says this verse. He says that the yato bhavad vishvam idam vichitram samstasyate yatra cha bhavatistate prajapatinam patir esha mahyam param pramanam bhagavan ananta. The highest authority for me is the unlimited Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom this wonderful creation emanates, and in whom its sustenance and dissolution rests. He is the origin of all Prajapatis, the personalities meant to produce living entities in the world. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 22nd chapter, 20th verse. So what can we take away from this verse? We also have to carry out our duties and we have to carry out our duties from our immediate authorities, from our parents, from even in the office. But just like how Kardama Muni didn't lose the focus that the ultimate authority was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we also need to remember that our ultimate goal of life is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So our topmost duty is to surrender to him, to Lord Vasudeva. So this is the first takeaway that I have noted from the 22nd chapter. The next is I'll just read the verse. Sharira manasa divya vayase ye cha manushaha bhautikascha katham klesha badhante hari samshrayam. Therefore, O Vidura, how can persons completely under the shelter of Lord Krishna in devotional service be put into miseries pertaining to the body, the mind, nature, and other men and living creatures? So, a person who has taken shelter of the Supreme Lord cannot be bound by the miseries of material nature. So, where does this verse come in context with? This is at the end of the 22nd chapter where Swayambhav Manu's rule is being described. How he, despite his situation in material happiness, he is still perfectly situated in Krishna consciousness because he is constantly remembering the Lord. So although he was enjoying materially, he was not degraded because he enjoyed his material happiness in Krishna consciousness. So here Maitreya Muni says to Vidura that a person in full Krishna consciousness who has taken full shelter of him cannot be bound by the miseries of material nature. So although he was in material nature, he was in this material world and he was performing all his duties, he was not bound by the miseries of material nature, the four miseries, which we all know, the four miseries. So why? Because he was constantly remembering the Supreme Lord. So even for us, although we are in this material world, the way we can not be affected by the four miseries of material nature is if we take full shelter of the Supreme Lord. So next point. Next point is the qualities of Devahuti. There are a lot of qualities of Devahuti that are very important, especially for us in Grihastha life, that we can see that is listed. I'll just read out the qualities one by one. So Devahuti pleased Kardama Muni by serving him constantly with the following qualities. She was very chaste, understanding the desires of the husband, great love, intimacy, purity of mind and body, great respect, sense control, love, sweet words, giving up all lust, pride, envy, greed, sinful activities and vanity, working sanely and diligently. So even if we see all these qualities, if we try and imbibe some of these qualities in our grihastha life and keep Krishna, all these qualities will not have any effect if we don't keep Krishna in the center. So although she was serving Kardama Muni with all these qualities, and because Kardama Muni was keeping Lord Vasudev in the center, she perfected her life in the material world. So similarly, as grihasthas, we need to constantly serve each other with all these qualities, so that, and by keeping Krishna in the center. So by doing this, we can also try and not be affected by the qualities of material nature. Next. Okay. So next is, I'll read this verse again. It is from the 23rd chapter, 42nd verse. Kim durapadanam tesham pumsam uddama chetasam yer ashritas tirthapadash charano vyasanatayaya. What is difficult to achieve for determined men who have taken refuge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's lotus feet? His feet are the source of sacred rivers like the Ganges, which put an end to the dangers of mundane life. So this is in reference to how, I think I mentioned this earlier as well. How did Kardama Muni achieve such transcendental powers which astonished all the celestial beings? It astonished himself as well. So how did he do this? Again, the whole theme again always comes back to taking shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If we are fully surrendered, there is nothing we cannot achieve. And this is actually a motivation for us in this life, that we have true live examples of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. They took complete shelter. They took his instructions as word, and they just completely depended on Krishna, and see what they could achieve. They built temples. They built so many temples. They achieved in so short time. They even without any knowledge of architecture, they actually built huge, beautiful temples. So how was this possible? Like, this is in Bhagavatam thousands of years ago, but still we can see this same principle even in our day-to-day life, in the lives of our spiritual masters. How are they able to achieve? How is Jai Pataka Maharaj, Guru Maharaj, how is he able to, in this condition, travel to so many countries, even in this condition, and inspire so many souls? Because they fully surrender, they fully depend on Krishna. So similarly, Kardama Muni here, we can see anything can be achieved by a person who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So here you can see how Kardama Muni, it is mentioned, Uddhava, I think Maitreya Muni is mentioning this point to Vidura, that he was able to achieve all of this because of his surrender, because of him being a devotee of the Supreme Lord. This is how he was able to build that magnificent mansion, and thousands of maidservants, and enjoy so opulently with Devahuti. So similarly, even for us, if we take this verse to heart, and we can achieve so many amazing things in spiritual life, in service to our Guru Maharaj, to Prabhupada, if we take full shelter of the Lord. So the next point would be the reason for the appearance of Lord Kapila. We know that whenever the Lord appears, he has a specific reason, and any specific avatar that he has, he always has a specific reason. So why did he appear as Lord Kapila? He appeared to explain the principles of self-realizations for those desiring freedom from material desires. So he appeared to revive this knowledge of Sankhya. He also mentioned this to Kardama Muni, that he wanted to relate this knowledge to Devahuti so that she will also attain perfection. So of course the consequent chapters are all about the teachings of what Kapiladev, Lord Kapila, related to Devahuti, and how she attained perfection by listening to this knowledge. So this is the Sankhya philosophy. So next, the last point that I wanted to share was, this was based on the principle of how Brahma was so satisfied with Kardama Muni. So again, I'll read this verse out. Etavatyeva shushrusha karya pitari putrakaihi badham ityanumanyeta gauravena gururvachaha. Sons ought to render service to their father exactly to this extent. One should obey the command of his father or spiritual master with due deference, saying, "Yes, sir." So how do we serve our spiritual master? Sorry, one second. Yes. So coming back to this verse, how do we serve our spiritual master? By accepting and following his instructions with respect and without duplicity. So basically, Hare Krishna.
Yes, Mataji.
Sorry, I'm just getting confused because I see. Okay, sorry. I got confused by something on my screen. Sorry. Yes. So okay. So how do we serve our spiritual master? just to reiterate this point, by accepting and following his instructions with respect and without duplicity. So Lord Brahma also relates this point with relation to Kardama Muni, that he served him perfectly by following his instructions without any duplicity. So this is how we serve our spiritual master. And if you remember when I say the way if we serve the instructions of our spiritual master like this, with due deference, with respect, and without any duplicity, then we can overcome the 4 material miseries of material nature. So I think I am concluded here. So I think we have set aside some time for question and answers, if anybody has.
Mataji, can you just give me the last verse of the number?
Yes, I can. 1 second. I forgot to mention it in the PPT.
It's 3:24:13, Prabhu.
Yeah, it is 3:24:13, 13th verse.
Krishna Mataji, thank you.
Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, I'm Jagan here.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Can you quickly run through? All the 6 takeaways in one line so that we can always
Sure.
better.
Yes, I will just go through all the 6 takeaways. Okay, the 6 takeaways. The first one is that the highest authority is always the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So even though we may have our intermediate authorities, we should always remember ultimate authority is always Krishna. The second takeaway is that a person who has taken shelter of Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be bound by the miseries of material nature. Third takeaway is basically all the qualities of Devahuti, which is listed. Fourth takeaway is that anything can be achieved if we take full shelter and if we fully surrender, depend basically on Krishna. Fifth takeaway is Lord Kapila appeared because he wanted to revive the Sankhya philosophy. The sixth takeaway is that we need to serve our spiritual master with respect and without duplicity.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
I have received one query. So basically,
yes,
the query is the selection of Kardama Muni for marriage by Swayambhuva Manu, his daughter. Of course, it was prearranged. But what kind of takeaways we can take for deciding the themes for today's brides?
Prabhu, can you repeat what kind
of what kind of takeaways we can take from how how Swayambhuva Manu selected Kardama Muni as a groom for his daughter. So what kind of lessons can we take from that selection in today's age of how grooms are selected?
Correct. I actually, when I was studying this material, I was trying to listen to a few lectures by other senior devotees, and in one of the lectures, it was written that actually this chapter and this topic of marriage of Kardama Muni and Devahuti is actually very controversial. Only because not controversial in that sense, it is controversial only because it is an arranged marriage, and in the West, I think in India it is still not so controversial, an arranged marriage, but in the West and increasingly they see arranged marriage as being regressive and oppressive. But if you actually see, like you said, to select the qualifications of a groom, where the parents used to see and decide the groom for the daughter, and it was this the devotee, it was Bhakti Rasamrit Maharaj. He said that even in Vedic times, it was not that arranged marriages are forced. There were many different types of marriages, and only when the lady had fully accepted, it was arranged, the wedding. So I think your question was how the selection of groom. The qualities of Kardama Muni, of course, he selected because of his austerity and of his, again, it comes back to surrender to Krishna, surrender to Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because of all his penances and his devotional service, Swayambhuva Manu could understand that he had complete mastery over his senses. And also, if you see, he has given even when he was asking for his daughter's hand in marriage, he put the condition that of renunciation. So from this we can understand how Swayambhuva Manu could, like any father in today's age, if they know that the groom is going to leave their daughter, they would not really be so forward to give their daughter's hand in marriage. But Swayambhuva Manu could understand that because he was renounced and because he had mastery over his senses, and because he was perfectly situated in understanding of Krishna consciousness and of the Supreme Lord, he could fulfill the goal of human life, which is he could bring Devahuti out of material existence and achieve, he could himself achieve, he was on the path to liberation, and he will also take his daughter in the same path to liberation. So in today's age, of course, in our devotee circles, this is what we aim for, to select a groom for a daughter, or vice versa, where they both can are firmly situated in the path back to Godhead. That is my take. If senior devotees have anything to add, please do.
Hare Krishna Mataji. So if I can summarize what you said, means
Yes.
one is that the key takeaway is that the girl should agree, and the second thing is that the spiritual inclination of the groom is more important than his material prosperity.
Yes. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So the second query is that it is my request, for the benefit of those who are present, if you can briefly describe the 3 types of miseries.
Sorry?
If you can briefly tell about the 3 types of miseries, it will be helpful.
1 second. Yeah. So there are the miseries of material existence. One is, of course, the 4 defects which are internal: the propensity to cheat, the propensity to be lazy. If I am sorry, but it is not on the tip of my mind, the exact 4 miseries. There are, I think, Prabhuji, if you can yourself explain.
Cheating propensity, illusion, the imperfect senses, and the propensity to make mistakes.
Yes.
The request was about the 3 types of miseries, Mataji, if possible.
The 3 types of miseries are the miseries caused by material nature, miseries caused by living entities, other living entities, and of course, miseries caused by one's own mind. I believe, is that what you're referring to, Prabhuji?
Yes, Mataji. Yes, Mataji. Thank you so much, Mataji.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, we have 3 more minutes for questions. If anybody would like to raise any queries, please go ahead. Hare Krishna.
Probably if there are no questions, we can start with bhajan.
Yes, yes, Mataji.
I have one question.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for the wonderful session. I have one question, Mataji. Like, post a lot of penance, when Lord appeared in front of the Kardama Muni, why he was particular in like asking the beautiful wife and not liberation or any other thing? How we can understand this?
He was asking for a beautiful wife to fulfill the order of his father, Lord Brahma, because Lord Brahma's instruction to him was to procreate. So he had, it was his father, Lord Brahma, was his spiritual master. So his spiritual master's instructions for him was to procreate and to have progeny. So he required a wife for this. So that is why he asked this boon from Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Okay, Mataji, thanks for the wonderful explanation. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Jagan Prabhu, you'd like to add anything, Prabhu?
Thanks, Mataji. A very good lecture and very simple, sweet, and very nice ending with 6 takeaways. Thanks a lot, and we are eagerly now waiting for your family bhajan. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji. He is going to sing Bhaja Hure Mana.
I think I will be singing.
Okay. Shall I put up it on the screen?
Yes, Prabhu. So I'll just, yeah, okay. What's your meeting? 710-263-365.
Mataji?
Yes, give me just 2 minutes, Prabhu. Take my number.
This conference will now be recorded.
Which he primarily shares that even in bhakti there is Vaidhi bhakti and Raganuga bhakti. Vaidhi bhakti and Raganuga bhakti mainly implies that how bhakti gives, never desire impersonal liberation, basically the concept of anya vilashita shunyam, jnana karmadi anavritam, anukulyena krishnanu, shilanam bhaktir uttama. The supreme, bhakti is where we don't have any other ulterior desires, any other desires for sense gratification. Yeah. So he gives various other descriptions on how a person should never desire impersonal liberation, always engage in his service, glorify his activities, is focusing, meditating on his form, talks, glorifies the Lord, and no doubt bhakti will give liberation and give so many other mystical powers, but ultimately a pure devotee of the Lord doesn't get distracted by those things and attains the goal of life. So 25th chapter covers mainly the glories of devotional service, and chapter 26 and 27 covers mainly jnana, that is Sankhya philosophy, and we will come to that. But before we go there, I just wanted to share one more verse, beautiful verse, which is there in the 25th chapter. The perfection in self-realization cannot be attained by any kind of yogi unless he engages in devotional service to Supreme Personality of Godhead, for that is the only auspicious path. The next chapter, 26, Kapiladeva explains the fundamental principles of material nature. And believe me, when I read this chapter with so many verses explaining in detail, intricate details of the whole material nature, how it is created, and how the Jivatma is covered by different elements. So I will try my level best to explain, but please understand that this is not a story or anything, but this is more technical knowledge which is given by the Lord for people who want to understand the technicality of the universe, and also because it is beneficial for all of us to just have this knowledge. So this is a beautiful verse which is shared in the 26th chapter, 2nd verse. Knowledge is the ultimate perfection of self-realization. I shall explain that knowledge unto you, by which the knots of attachment to material world are cut. So somehow or the other we are attached to this material world. We are dragged by the desires. We are dragged by desire to enjoy our senses. So Kapiladeva explains that how, if one understands how these desires work, if one understands how the intricacies of this material nature, then it will be easier for us to be not attached to these material elements. So Kapiladeva explains the benefits of hearing Sankhya philosophy, especially to detach ourselves from this material world. So one of the important things which Kapila Muni explains, which is of course there in Bhagavad Gita also, but here Kapila Dev explains in a very, very detailed manner First of all, the Jiva, who is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, how does he get affected? How does he get carried away? We have all heard that the spirit soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So we are actually Satchit Anand, but in a very, very minuscule way. But how do we, the spirit soul who is so pure, same qualitatively as the Supreme Lord, how do we get affected by the material world? Why do we get entangled here? So it is explained that seeing the various forms offered by Prakriti. So what happens is that the spirit soul who is pure, because of our desire to enjoy separate from Krishna, we are forced to come in the material world, and because we are presented with so many different forms of the material nature, the Jiva gets bewildered. The soul gets bewildered, and because of ignorance, because of avidya, it starts thinking that he is the doer. That, oh, what can I do? What can I enjoy with this body? And that comes because of the false ego. We start lording it over the nature. We think that, yes, I can enjoy this. If I get this body, I will be able to enjoy this. If I get this body, I will be able to enjoy this energy of the material nature. So that's how the living entity gets entangled in this material world. And this misconception leads the living entity into bondage of repeated birth and death. So that is the main cause of the Jiva. So first thing, the Jiva sees the various forms offered by the material nature, and because of ignorance, because of avidya, it gets bewildered and starts thinking that we, the living entity, is the doer of activities by false identifying ourselves, that we are the controller, we want to be the Lord. And of course, then because of that misconception, the Jiva gets entangled and gets entangled into the repeated cycle of birth and death. And then Devahuti again asks a very technical question. She asks, kindly explain the characteristics of Supreme Person and his energies. Please explain me that who is this Lord? Right? How does he come about? How does this whole creation come about? And his energies, that is Prakriti. So then Lord Kapila, from text 10 to 72, one by one, he describes the characteristics, he describes the different products and different ways of how this material world is created. And believe me, if you all get chance, please read the translations of each verse, and you will know that how in detail Kapila Muni explains the whole creation of all different elements. There are 5 gross elements, there are 5 tanmatras, sense objects, the senses and the 4 antakaranas, mind, intelligence, false ego, and chitta. So Kapila Muni explains the characteristics and products of pradhana, which is mainly the characteristics of Prakriti and Purusha, characteristics of time, Mahat-tattva and Chitta, characteristics of false ego, and even within the false ego, how this false ego works in Sattva Gun and Raja Gun, and how the mind also acts if it is in mode of goodness, passion, ignorance, how the intelligence acts when it is mode of goodness, passion, ignorance, and how the senses act. And then the products of the false ego in ignorance, tanmatras and 5 gross. And ultimately, Kapila Muni explains the Karya Srishti, that how this material world is created. Yeah. So one of the things which, of course, it is all these verses explains too much in detail on how there is the sound, ether, touch, air, form. It forms fire, taste, water, smell, and earth. Like actual creation is explained by Kapiladeva through these various verses. And all of these verses are explained with beautiful analogies. And eventually, when Kapila Muni explains the whole creation in terms of the universe, he explains that how the Supreme Lord enters the universe along with Kala, Karma, and Gunas. And when the Supreme Lord enters, those elements roused into activity and united by the presence of the Lord, and an unintelligent egg arises, from which appears the Virat Rupa. And within this universal egg, the universal form, 14 planetary systems, which is covered outside by 7 layers. And each layer is 10 times thicker than the previous layer. And those of you who have attended the Vedic cosmology courses done by His Grace Radhapat Pankaj Prabhu will know that. So most of it is covered from this chapter. So, and eventually Kapiladeva explains the formation of the Virat. The same Virat Roop which Arjuna had inquired, that since you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, can you show me the Virat Roop? And this is the Virat Roop which Krishna showed to Arjuna. The same Virat Roop actually in detail is explained, that how the mouth, nostrils, eyes, ears, skin, genitals, anus, hands, legs, veins, abdomen, heart, they are formed of the Virat Roop. And how the demigods who represent each and every organ, each and every limb, each and every senses of the Lord represent. For example, the mouth, from mouth comes speech, from speech comes fire. From nostrils come olfactory senses, grahana and wind. From eyes, sense of sight and sun god. From ears, auditory sense, stotram and dig devatas. From skin, sense of touch and herbs, the devatas of the skin. From genitals comes semen, and from there deity of waters, apa. From anus, organs of defecation, and eventually mrityu, death. From hands, power of grasping and dropping things, and that is taken care by Indra. Legs, process of movement is done by Lord Vishnu. Veins gives birth to blood, and rivers, the deity presiding over the veins is Nadya. Abdomen, feelings of hunger and thirst, and the deity presiding is ocean, Samudra. And heart gives birth to mind, intelligence, false ego and consciousness, and mind is represented by Chandra, intelligence by Brahma, ego, false ego by Shiva, and consciousness by Lord Vasudeva. And they all these demigods, when the Virat Roop appears, all these demigods, when they appear eventually, they all try to wake up the Virat Roop. And finally, none of them are able to wake up the Virat Roop. They all try. So one by one, they all enter the body of the Virat Roop. And finally, when Vasudeva, consciousness, that is the super soul, enters, that's when the Virat Roop actually gets up, wakes up. Yeah, so this is explained in the 26th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Very, very technical, but what I really found as a takeaway was in one sense, to give a glimpse, is these two beautiful verses, that when a man is sleeping, all his material assets, namely the vital energy, the sense of recording knowledge, the senses for working, the mind and intelligence, cannot arouse him, right? So when we are sleeping, nothing makes us to get up, all the power that we have to record knowledge, the senses that were working, our mind which was functioning, our intelligence, nothing helps us to get up. What actually helps us to get up in the morning is the super soul within us. And Kapila Muni shares in this chapter, the last two verses, that therefore through devotion, detachment and advancement in spiritual knowledge acquired through concentrated devotional service. So how do we get this devotion, detachment and advancement in spiritual knowledge? By concentrated devotional service. One should contemplate that super soul as present in this very body, although simultaneously apart from it. So the super soul within our body is the one who helps us to function every day. Yeah. So with this, Kapila Muni ends the second chapter of the Sankhya philosophy ends, and then in this chapter again Devahuti asks questions, and Kapila Muni continues, where he explains the understanding of material nature. So again, this particular chapter begins with this beautiful verse, that when the soul is under the spell of material nature and false ego, identifying his body as the self, he becomes absorbed in material activities. And by the influence of false ego, he thinks that he is the proprietor of everything. And the conditioned soul therefore transmigrates into different species of life, higher and lower, because of his association with the mode of material nature. And unless he is relieved of material activities, he has to accept this position because of his faulty work. So a lot of technical details again is explained in this chapter also. First of all, Jiva in the conditioned state is situated in this Prakriti, is bound by different gunas, and when the same Jiva becomes absorbed in these gunas, bewildered by the false ego, he starts acting, and all his faulty actions bind him in the samsara chakra, repeated birth and death. And eventually he gets entangled. So Kapila Muni now shares the deeper aspects of jnana, attaining liberation by yoga. That how one can attain liberation by yoga. So basically, Bhakti Mishra Jnana is explained here. So one who follows with sincerity, with devotion and faith, Ashtanga Yoga, he can also progress in the spiritual world, to the spiritual world. But again, Prabhupada in his purpose explains that how ultimately to get into the technicality of all these different types of yoga and jnana will become a very lengthy process. So the easier path is, of course, to just engage our mind and senses in devotional service. And the analogy given is, of course, that as Jiva, as spirit soul, we are just like a small light, just a small light bulb, which can which has a capacity to give light or energy or heat to a very limited level. But when the sun comes, which is the Supreme Lord, you can see the sun on the first impression of the sun on the ocean, and then after the ocean, the walls of your house, and then you see this light everywhere. So similarly, Lord's presence is everywhere around us in the material world, but we are just a very minuscule part and parcel of the Supreme. So the subtle aspect of how the soul is covered by the material coverings, especially through mind, intelligence, and ego, is also shared. Inferring the presence of soul and super soul is explained in the text 12 and 13, which I just explained, and then soul without the material covering is very, very pure, and yet he appears to be covered by ego and its products, senses and mind. So Devahuti then also asks a very practical question about how rare it is to get liberation, and because it is one of the most important things for any spiritual aspirant is to get liberated from this material world. And Kapiladeva recommends that by intense practice, Tivrena Bhakti Uttama. So intense bhakti for a long time without desire for fruitive results, by executing prescribed duties, nourishment by hearing about the Lord, perfect knowledge and detachment, austerity, yoga, self-absorption. These are the things that if one practiced, it becomes very easier and to progress in the spiritual world. And Kapila Muni explains further that Prakriti cannot harm an enlightened soul. Right? And especially because the soul in itself is very pure, and as explained in the Bhagavad Gita also, that the yogi or the devotee of the Lord, although he is performing the action, he is not bound by the reactions. And the last part, finally, Kapila Muni explains that a yogi or a devotee of the Lord engages in self-realization for many, many lifetimes with complete detachment. And finally, he gets self-realized mainly because of the mercy of the Lord. We may do our effort, we may do our endeavors, but it is the mercy of the Lord which helps us to attain the ultimate goal of life. And the Lord who is situated in everyone's heart is no longer attracted to the, the soul which is situated in everyone's heart is no longer attracted to any byproducts of any kind of yoga. And he finally attains liberation where even death cannot overcome him. So devotee of the Lord is not disturbed by any material aspects, and he ultimately progresses in his spiritual life. So personally for me, it is a very, very technical knowledge which is shared by Kapiladeva, and next few chapters is going to be more technical. He explains about the Ashtanga Yoga philosophy and then deeper aspects of different kinds of bhakti. But this particular chapter, in essence, shares the importance of devotional service also. The influence, this particular verse which shares the influence of material nature has covered the living entity, and thus it is as if the living entity were always in a blazing fire. But by the process of seriously discharging devotional service, this influence can be removed. Just as wooden sticks which cause a fire are themselves consumed by it. So I was trying to understand, what does it mean that, that the wooden sticks which cause a fire are themselves consumed by it. And in the purport, Prabhupada very beautifully explains this. And he shares that how the fire is conserved in the wooden sticks. And when circumstances are favorable, the fire is ignited. But the wooden sticks which are the cause of the fire are also consumed by the fire. So similarly, the living entity, conditional life of material existence is due to his desire to lord it over the material nature. So because we have this desire to enjoy the material world, so instead of enjoying, we end up suffering in this material world. So we become like these wooden sticks which are ourselves cause of our sufferings. So thus ends the 27th chapter of third canto. Please forgive me if I am not able to answer any questions, but the topic today that we all discussed is a little technical, but at the same time, it's important for us to understand how this universe works, how all of us exist, and also to understand material nature. And actually in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also explains that one who understands the functioning of material nature, half the job is done in one sense. Can liberate himself from the repeated cycle of birth and death. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you
Hare
for this very wonderful presentation. There is one query. So, what do we mean by Ashtanga Yoga? So can we give some brief?
So Ashtanga Yoga actually is covered in the 28th chapter. Actually, Devahuti herself asks this question that, what is Ashtanga Yoga? Give us this different aspect. So basically, Ashta Anga means 8 limbs of yoga and begins with Yama, Niyama, Asana, all those things. 8 limbs of yoga are explained in detail in the next chapter actually.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I have a question to you.
Yeah.
Why did Kardama Muni left Devahuti when he knew that Lord Kapila was going to come to them? Because the purpose of renunciation was also to serve the Lord. And when he knew that the Lord is coming to their house, his son, so he could serve the Lord very well while being at home also. So why did he decide to renounce from it?
Oh, Prabhu, sorry, I couldn't hear your question properly.
Okay. Prabhuji, my question is, when Kardama Muni knew that Lord Kapila was going to take birth through them, so why did he still decide to renounce everything? Instead, he could be at home and serve the Lord, because the purpose of renunciation is also to serve the Lord. And when the same Lord is coming in Sakshat child form, so there's nothing like serving him in that form, because it is a dream of many other devotees, right? To get the Lord as their son. When he still left.
Yes. So basically, actually, Kardama Muni was a great devotee of the Lord, no doubt. Otherwise, the Lord himself would never take birth. But, he was in the mood of Dasyaras as a servant of the Lord. And he did not want to mix his feeling of Dasyaras with Vatsalyaras. So that is one of the reasons, and also to follow the Vedic injunctions as to one should leave home at a certain age. And any which ways the Lord will make him renounce in due course of time. So why not renounce immediately? So that's the reason why Kardama Muni decides to leave immediately as soon as Lord Kapila appears.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Any other question?
Harinam Prabhu, if you can stop sharing.
Yes,
I will.
Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, I'm Jagan Prabhu here. Hare Krishna, thanks a lot, Prabhu, for a very nice class. Calm, quiet, simple, sweet, very composed class. So I
feel like this was the most technical. Actually, in fact, not only this, but the next few sessions of this teachings of Lord Kapila is very technical, but it requires a lot of attention, including reading it.
Yeah. So I will take a couple of minutes only, Prabhu.
Yes,
Prabhu. Because this the whole concept of this program is each one teach one. And whenever there is a doubt, we are trying to make the best efforts to teach ourselves and also teach others. A couple of months back, I had given a presentation on this topic, Ashtanga Yoga. I will only show two or three slides, and then we will send this full presentation pack to the forum. Okay, so like Prabhu mentioned, Ashtanga Yoga is primarily from a Bhagavad Gita point of view. It is described in 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita called Dhyana Yoga.
Yes.
And it has got Yama, Dhyana, and all these Pratyahara, Pranayama, Asana leading to some Niyama, Yama, Dhyana, Dharana, Pratyahara, Pranayama, Asana leading to this. And the other, so each has got a importance. Emma deals with ethical standards, our behavior or moral conduct of life, being a good corporate citizen kind of a thing. Niyama is for self-discipline or to do or regulatory activities. Asana is very often misunderstood as the prime yoga. It deals with the bodily fitness of the body and to develop a habit of concentrating the mind. This asana, people think it's a yoga, but it's only part of yoga. And then, of course, control of breathing, pranayama again, to extend the life or to get the more. I think, Prabhu, you need to mute yourself. Someone has to mute themselves. Yeah. And then Pratyahara is a stage where we tend to, after doing those 4 things, Pratyahara is a place where we try to withdraw. Whatever is not needed for us in terms of mind also, and whatever is there, we need to make ourselves more aware. And this is in a Krishna conscious point of view, anartha nivritti. Anukulasya sankalpa, pratikulasya varjana. Whatever is there, catch it. Whatever is not there, leave it. And dharana is about when we go to nistha and asakti mode. Dharana is about dealing with these distractions. And dhyana is an uninterrupted flow of concentration. And samadhi is a state of ecstasy. So these are the things from a Krishna conscious point of view. Srila Prabhupada has used dhyana and samadhi to some extent in a reference in nectar of devotion. Dhyana is the way when we try to remember Krishna through our chanting or devotional practices. Samadhi is a state when we can really apply the golden rule of bhakti, of always remembering Krishna, never forgetting Krishna. What is that verse? Always remembering Krishna, Vishnu, and never forgetting Vishnu. This is a verse that Lord Shiva has given to Parvati. So this is how these things do. Some smartavya satatam Vishnu, vismartavya na jatati. Sarve vidhi nishedasyor etayor eva kinkara. Always remembering Krishna, never forgetting Krishna. These are the 2 core principles that deal with samadhi. And once we get these are the two core principles, and every other thing that we do, all the do's and don'ts become the subservients of these two good principles. So this is how it is, and there are several other slides also. We will basically share with the person in the group. And again, I really thank those people who are coming out with these questions, because when someone asks a question and when we are able to answer, it not only helps the person who asked the question, but all those people who are also getting the information. With this, I conclude. Thanks a lot, Harinam Prabhu. Thanks a lot, Bandhu Baldev Prabhu, for giving us this opportunity to share, listen, and be together in the moments of this critical moments of our lives. Whether all around the anxiety is there, but through Bhagavatam Katha every day, these 2 hours, we're trying to absorb ourselves into a mood of remembering Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Actually, tomorrow's class will be given by Ratnangi Revati Mataji, and her topic is Lord Kapila explaining the execution of devotional service, and the first 12 verses will explain the whole Ashtanga Yoga philosophy.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you, Harinam Prabhu. Thanks to Jagan Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Nice clarification also.
Harinam Prabhu, you will be joining us for the quiz, right?
Yes, Prabhu, please.
Yes, I am here, Prabhu.
Yeah,
Hare Krishna. Santa Professor Prabhu, are you there?
Yes, Prabhu, Hare Krishna, I am there. Can you please make me the presenter, Prabhu?
Yeah, 1 minute. I'm making you the presenter. Yes, Prabhu, I made you the presenter.